Honored to be here, and I have been working in animal welfare all my life, and so just to give a little bit more of a picture of what I've done, I have a few slides, not too many, about myself, me, myself, and I. But then later on, I will talk about the history of World Animal Day. World Animal Day has been more popular in some countries, other less so. But it's a day that is worthwhile to celebrate, and it's tomorrow, the 4th of October. And I know in the Netherlands, my home country, there will be a big march in Amsterdam for the recognition of animals. And one of my missions has been to promote World Animal Day, for the rest of the world. And I hope, particularly next year, we'll be able to introduce it a bit more here in the United States as well. Okay. So this is where I'm from. A river runs through it. It's a little village in the Netherlands, agricultural village, mostly when I was there, not so much anymore. So I started off as a newspaper boy. I did for like 8 years. I was on the two sides of the river. I was going on my bicycle delivering the newspapers. But the important part there was that I tried to create a monopoly, because when you do the same route every time, you might as well have 4 different newspapers delivered. So in the end of my newspaper career, I had the monopoly of 5 newspapers that I would deliver. Anyway, but also I said it's agricultural, and it was mostly dairy. So a dairy farm, next door was a dairy farm. As a young boy, you want to work with the farm, you want to drive the tractors, making hay, milk the cows. I would go to at that time, the old-fashioned way was that the milking equipment would go into the field to milk the cows. Nowadays that has changed. Usually the cows come to the facility. And then when I was 16, we had cats at home that lived at home, and that were my friends. And then I realized that we treat these animals not equally. We eat the cows, we drink the milk, and we cuddle the cat. And I thought I should treat them equally. So I either will eat the cat or I will stop eating the cow. So when I was 16, I stopped eating the cows. And then I became the village vegetarian. But I was the only one, and of course my parents were very concerned, but I still survived. So when I was concerned about farm animals, I increased my knowledge, and I went to the big city, and I joined a farm animal action group. And that was the start of my career. I studied psychology in Utrecht, the center of the Netherlands, but I quickly gave it up because I found activism more important. Once I got into university, I said, well, I can always go back to university, but the activism needs my help now. So I stayed working for farm animals. I moved to Amsterdam, and that's where I actually also got my next job. So looking back now, because I'm officially retired, so I look back at career, I realized that I founded or co-founded organizations. And it's funny that I only realized then it was almost every 5 years I would start a new organization. And it is not because the organization failed, because all of these organizations listed here that I founded or co-founded, they still exist. And it's kind of nice to look back, and if you look at my main point was there, I like to empower people. I like to facilitate, to make it people possible. One reason is just being efficient, because if other people do the work, it means I don't have to do it. So I really like for people to learn and to start. So if I look back, there's probably, I don't know, maybe 300-400 people working for these organizations, except for Pars, who did. I only founded two branches, and for Pars is a way bigger organization. Actually, one of the biggest organizations in the world. I mean, for Pars is not as well known in the United States, but they are one of the bigger organizations worldwide. And Joseph Fabian, the CEO, is here as well. So I started in the Netherlands, and then gradually I moved to international. And can the next slide. And at the moment I'm a board member of still of these organizations. The World Federation, James Yates is here as well as the CEO. Species Survival Network, dealing with CITES, the GFS, the Sanctuary Network, and then for Pars I'm still on the board in the Netherlands and in the United States. And then NCAP, which is a dormant organization at the moment, which I hope to revive, but it's based in Boston. This just a little, so there was just about me, but it's just to give an example of the campaigns I've done, and actually what got me into international animal welfare was the fur campaign. The anti-fur campaign in the Netherlands was very successful. It wiped out the fur retailers in about 5 years. They were all gone. There was no retail fur anymore. The problem was there was still fur farms, and so I because it was so successful, the World Society for Protection of Animals hired me to do their fur campaign, and we developed this campaign which. This is before the internet. You know, many of you guys don't remember that, but there was a time there was no internet, and I think the fax machine was kind of the quickest facility we had. But still, this poster was printed in 20 languages, and the way I did it, I had this poster without any text, and I sent it to organizations and said, if you fill in the text, we'll print it for you. And then I would jump in my little car and bring it all around Europe, all the newly printed posters. It was well, not necessarily a sign of success, but something that really did work. The Italian version is worn by this girl, and this girl is actually Madonna jogging in Hyde Park. So a good advertisement on the cover of the Daily Mail. It went really well. So that got me into the international work. World Animal Day, another small part that I played was that World Animal Day has been existent for quite a while, and I'll go into that later. But there was no real logo that they used. So there was, in the US here, there was some foundation, they had a contest, they say, if you write the best proposal for a logo, then you get the top designers of Coca-Cola to design a logo. So I sent in a proposal, I won the contest, and so this design of the World Animal Day logo was made by a designer who used to work for Coca-Cola, which, you know, it's a good name to have support of. October 4th, I said it's not as common here or well known here as it is in some of the other countries, and that's in part because it also started in Europe. The next slide. So when I started, when I became aware of World Animal Day, I wanted to do more of it. I was wondering, so what is the origin? What was the first time World Animal Day was organized? When did it start? And I looked up at Wikipedia, and it said it was the first World Animal Day was decided by a group of ecologists in Florence, Italy. Interesting. I said, can I find out what meeting it was? Maybe there are minutes of the meeting, that what decision was made, what was the discussion about. So I went to look at what it was. Now, in the process of looking it up, I found out that actually the animal protection, animal welfare movement has a long history. Of course, it started with the founding, more or less the founding of the RSPCA in the UK. But then I realized that the movement, the international movement at itself, already in 1860 would come together in the city of Dresden to talk about strategies, animal welfare, and I think there were at that time there were only 17 delegates, but they came from London, they came from Paris, and they would meet internationally. And when I looked further, it turns out that almost every 2 years there used to be international meetings. And particularly on the Vienna meeting that took place in 1929, I happened to get my hands on the report. Next slide. And the report, Bericht, is actually a complete report of all the debates during that Congress. And it is 280 pages of discussions, French and English in the language. And you see from the picture, this is a meeting of the picture. 500 people came together from 35 countries. So this is 1929. But one of the interesting things that were discussed there, this is still the, at the end of the Congress, they would have a demonstration. And this is to get a better Animal Welfare Act in Austria. So it shows that activism and demonstrations is apparently of all times, and many people don't realize that. We have the animal activists now, and we know we have a bit of history. But even in 1929, there were people going out on the street for the interest of animals. Very important. Next slide. So at this meeting, and it's really fascinating some of the people that I have been able to identify in the picture. This lady is from China, for example, so she came all the way from China to this meeting. Often at that time, animal protection in those days was an activity of the upper class. So people were able to travel. They were often diplomats or they were ambassadors, but they were high level. So at that time, animal protection was really something of the people in the upper layer of the societies. But one of the proposals that was discussed at that meeting was the creation of a section for the protection of animals at the League of Nations. And the League of Nations, as you all know, because you're students of history, is now called the United Nations. It was called the League of Nations. It was seated in Geneva, in Switzerland. And actually, these animal groups, because the League of Nations was in Geneva, they set up an office in Geneva. With the Joint Animal Protection Organization in 1927, they started an animal protection office, and they would organize exhibits where delegates to the League of Nations could see how badly animals are treated, and be encouraged by the League of Nations to do something about it. And I went through the archive, and you find letters from the concerned public writing to the League of Nations, could you please do something about this and that. The other proposal, and I must say both of the proposals at that meeting were not accepted. They were discussed, but they thought having a section for the protection of animals at the United Nations, it's a bit too early. That was the thought. But there was a 10-page document in French, English, and German to argue why it would be important. The decision was it was too early to do that. I don't know whether it's still too early, but after almost 100 years, maybe this is something that we should have at the United Nations. Other proposal was the creation of World Animal Day, which also was discussed. At that time, there was already Be Kind to Animals Week, which was more popular in the United States, started by the American Humane Association, and at the time it was not officially recognized. At that Vienna meeting, the person, so I have this whole report of 280 pages, and it's different languages, but I was able to read it. The person who proposed this was Heinrich Zimmermann, and Heinrich Zimmermann was an interesting person, but he He was the chairman of the Friends of Cat Societies in Germany. But you see, they actually had 40,000 members at the time when they had it. So it's not like a small fringe group. It was widespread. And in those times, if you look at what was happening in Berlin, particularly, but also I know in Paris and definitely in London, there were groups of organizations for the interest of animals. In Berlin, there were operas where in the break people would do speeches about animal rights. Actually, the vegetarianism was quite widespread there. Again, in the upper layers of society, of course. Next slide. So Heinrich Zimmermann, he published a bi-weekly magazine. This Mensch und Hund is a magazine, and I only have one a year, but I have all the copies. Every 2 weeks, he published a magazine about animal welfare. It was not just about dogs, as I suggest, but it was about animal welfare, animal rights, vegetarianism, humane slaughter. Vivisection was a big issue at the time, because vivisection was very primitive, so you get these grueling stories about what's happening to animals in vivisection. He also wrote a few books, and he had a radio program for children about animals. This whole period where I'm talking about, where animal welfare, at least in the higher regions, was quite prominent, was between the two wars. So it's called the interbellum. So between the two wars, it's really this whole discussion at the higher levels was quite prominent. So Heinrich Zimmermann organized the first World Animal Day, and I was lucky enough to find the pamphlet announcing the first World Animal Day, and it was organized in Berlin on March 24th, 1925, and it took place in the Sportpalast. Sportpalast was at that time the biggest building they could find. It was attended by 5,000 people, and Sportpalast, it actually was taken down in 1973. But one of my favorite questions always, what is the similarity between the pop group Deep Purple and World Animal Day? And they both were in the Sportpalast. Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, they all performed in the Sportpalast. So this is and it is on the 24th of March. And you see, it's not the 4th of October. And I was wondering why was that? So I go through his magazines and try to find out. And the simple reason was that on the 4th of October, the Sportpalast was not available. So he organized it on the 24th of March. A few years it did the same, and eventually, I think in 1929, it was on the 4th of October. But it was still not officially recognized by the joint animal protection groups. It was something that Heinrich Zimmermann did. He promoted, he went to international meetings to promote it, but it was still something. Some countries took it over. Czechoslovakia at the time, in the UK, so if you see mention of World Animal Day after 1925, it's because they had some contact with Heinrich Zimmermann and they decided to do it, but it was not official. The next meeting, said that every 2 years there were international meetings. The next meeting took place in Florence, in Italy, at Palazzo Pitti, and at that meeting, officially, it was recognized, decided by the joint animal protection organizations that World Animal Day would be on the 4th of October. Next one. And this is the Sala Bianca, the White Room, where in the palace the meeting was held, and on May 8, 1931, that's the official day that World Animal Day was officially recognized. And I went there, and when the guard didn't look, I quickly put a logo there. But it's kind of interesting to know that almost 100 years ago, hundreds of people, of animal protection people, were meeting there to decide this will be World Animal Day. The reason why it also succeeded was, of course, Assisi which is the birthplace of Saint Francis of Assisi, on the 4th of October, was only 100 miles away from Florence. So obviously there were a lot of Italian delegates, so they were very much in support of having the patron saint's day of Saint Francis of Assisi to be officially recognized as the 4th of October. And of course Saint Francis of Assisi was known that some say he was able to talk to the animals, walk with the animals, I guess, and so that officially became the day. Now Heinrich Zimmermann, I was kind of interested who was he, what happened to him. Turns out he was not Heinrich Zimmermann, but he was born in Warsaw. He is Heinrich Zimmermann, the Polish spelling. He was first a journalist in Lodz, and I actually found some of the newspaper reports on Lodz of those times. He didn't write much about animals at all. He wrote a little bit about the horses in the First World War, because that was a major concern at the time. But he moved to Berlin in 1923. Again, I could search the records of the Lodz town hall, and it actually says when he moved to Berlin. But one of the interesting things is, of course, he was not born he did not live in the best of times, because while he was in Berlin, gradually the Nazis came to power, and one of the things they did, this is a warning, is that they wanted to have the member list of the Cat Protection Society of his organization, to screen them for Jewish members. And what Zimmermann did, he was a Jew himself, but what Zimmermann did, he burned the records, so the Nazis could not get hold of them. Funny story to this, I called the Cat Protection Society still exists. I called them up. This is a few years ago. I called them up and talked to them. So what, do you have any records of Heinrich Zimmermann? Do you know? And no, they don't. And and I said, yeah, he burned the records. And they still sounded not quite happy about that, because they lost their donors, and they had to build up the organization again. But then in 1938, the Nazis decided that all foreign-born Jews should move outside the country. Sounds familiar. So he was expelled in 1938, and he did not go back to Warsaw. He went to Krakow. And Krakow had its own ghetto, so he probably lived in the ghetto. We don't know. I went to Krakow, couldn't find any record of them, but Krakow was pretty close to Auschwitz, and Belzec and Sobibor and Treblinka. Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka were 3 extermination camps in Poland, and so it is. We know from the records that 130,000 from the Krakow area people were moved to Belzec and were killed there. But the interesting thing on this one again is that there's you might be familiar, Yad Vashem they keep the records of all Jews that died in the Second World War, and there's no record of Heinrich Zimmermann. So I'm still looking at what I know. He died in 1942. That's what happened when the people were moved to Belzec. But we still have no record of when he actually died. So this is one of my goals in life, that I still hope to document. I went to Krakow, the Schindler factory is there, from Schindler's List in Krakow, but we still don't know. So this was the entrance of the Krakow ghetto. Nevertheless, Heinrich Zimmermann has been, to some extent, successful, because World Animal Day is celebrated in quite a few countries. So I made a nice collage over where do, but this a lot of the African countries, a lot of European countries, they celebrate World Animal Day. There's a big demonstration tomorrow in the Netherlands, organized by one of the organizations that I founded 25 years ago. So that makes me feel good. But it's still because I think of the effort of Heinrich Zimmermann. It's still celebrated, and hopefully, it's worthwhile, especially with the story behind it, to revive that, to push this more, because it's not just about animals, it's also about humanity and about what the effort that people make to do good. So at the end, my work, I always try to have a broad approach, be basic, don't talk too much of the high level sentience of animals, very important, and I do use that, but we need to reach the regular public. I think World Animal Day is a great tool to use that, because you can do a special treat for your pet. You can be a vegan for one day, or maybe longer. There's other things. Anybody can fill in World Animal Day in their own way. So that's why I think it's a great tool. It's also important to form coalitions. I think to work together. There are 50,000 animal protection organizations in the United States, of organizations that have the interest of animals at heart. They all do good work, but a bit more unity would be nice. So one of my ideals would eventually be that there would be an American Federation for Animals. There's coalitions, there's some groups that work together quite effectively, I must say, but to have something like the World Federation, which now exists, and there's a Eurogroup for Animals, is in Europe. They bring all the European groups together. There's Asia for Animals, who brings all the Asian groups together. And it would be good to have something in the United States, or maybe North America or the United States, that brings all the groups together. Not necessarily to work closely together, but to have a common theme. All these people, they have the interest of animals at heart. And how can we convert that into something that actually is going to benefit animals? Not just animals as individuals, but animals that respect the animal as a being, and take care of what their lives are supposed to be. So this is also why something basic that helps everybody. Why I support the library, because we, as it shows here, there is a long history in animal welfare. It's not just us here, it's people that came before us. In a way, I have more respect for the early day pioneers, because they had to work in a society that was less receptive of our cause, but nevertheless they did that. I mean, there was no Peter Singer, or there was no Tom Regan at the time to guide them, but still they felt that they had to do something for animals, which is I find respectful. That was the story. Thank you very much.